Senate Democrats will propose raising $975 billion in new taxes over the next decade in the budget they will release this week, setting up a sharp contrast with a House Republican plan to balance the budget over 10 years without new tax increases. In their first budget since 2009, Senate Democrats will propose reducing the federal budget deficit by $1.85 trillion over the next 10 years through equal doses of new taxes and spending cuts, according to a Democrat familiar with the proposal. The plan is part of the budget blueprint for fiscal year 2014 that Senate Budget Committee Chairwoman Patty Murray D. Walsh is expected to formally release on Wednesday. Her plan would raise $975 billion in new revenue in the next decade by closing tax breaks that benefit upper-income households and corporations. Democrats plan to match the new taxes with $975 billion in spending reductions. They would lower spending on domestic programs by $493 billion, cut $240 billion from defense spending and count on $242 billion in savings from lowered interest payments on the federal debt. Democrats would lower domestic spending in part by saving $275 billion through changes to federal health care programs that are smaller in scale than Republicans have proposed for Medicare and Medicaid. While House Republicans are doubling down on the extreme budget that the American people already rejected, Senate Democrats are going to be working on a responsible, pro-growth budget that reflects the values and priorities of middle-class families across the country, Ms. Murray said in a written statement Tuesday. Democrats would also replace the $85 billion in across-the-board spending cuts that recently took effect, known as sequestration, with more targeted cuts. They would create a $100 billion program aimed at generating new jobs by funding the repair of aging infrastructure. President Barack Obama proposed a large infrastructure repair plan in his State of the Union address last month. The introduction of dual-link budgets this week from the House and Senate Budget Committees marks an attempt by lawmakers to return Congress to its traditional process of passing the budget each year. Ongoing fiscal policy fights have derailed that process recently, forcing lawmakers to cobble together stopgap spending measures to keep the government running. Details of the budgets emerging this week show members of each party sticking to the principles that have made reaching a broad fiscal bargain elusive. Earlier Tuesday, House Republicans released a plan that would eliminate the annual federal deficit within 10 years by curbing spending over that period by $4.6 trillion. The plan, from House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan R., Wisconsin, doesn't include new tax increases but does rely in part on the $600 billion over 10 years generated from the higher tax rates on upper-income households that lawmakers agreed to in January. That agreement was part of the deal to avert tax increases on a broad set of Americans and spending cuts known as the fiscal cliff. In their budget, GOP lawmakers would repeal the president's health care overhaul, turn Medicaid into a state block grant program and create an optional program that would allow newly eligible seniors in 2024 to determine whether to continue using traditional Medicare or have the government assist paying the premiums of a private health insurance plan. Mr. Ryan said Tuesday that while Republicans had lost the presidential election, in which he ran as his party's vice presidential nominee, lawmakers in the GOP-controlled House still had a responsibility to present their budget approach to the public. The election didn't go our way, believe me, I know what that feels like, he said at a press conference. But he said the election outcome didn't mean Republicans should surrender their principles. Whether the country intended it or not, we have divided government, he said. The White House criticized the House Republican budget Tuesday, calling it the wrong course for reducing the federal budget deficit. Press Secretary Jay Carney said in a written statement that Mr. Obama would continue to work with Republicans and Democrats in Congress to grow the economy and cut the deficit in a balanced way. Mr. Obama says a balanced approach includes tax increases as well as spending cuts to rein in deficits. The president is scheduled to travel to Capitol Hill Tuesday to meet with Senate Democrats, with visits to House Democrats and Republicans from both chambers planned for later this week.